Hello to everyone. Hello to everyone online. My name is Jess. I'm Global Community Manager at the RSA, and it is a real pleasure to sort of host and facilitate these events with fellows, led by fellows, and to welcome you all into the conversation as well. So this is a panel discussion today, but we will have room at the end for Q&A. That's questions from you here in person, but also online. So as questions emerge for you throughout, do pop them into the chat and I'll make sure that I have a look and present those to the panelists at the end. So this event that we have today sits as part of a bigger series of events that's running throughout the year that's being led by Alexandra Kroviet. Sorry. And it is all about looking at the challenges that we face as society today and how we're navigating those. And today specifically, we're looking at how we maintain our sense of agency throughout rapid transformation. And we have a fantastic panel with us. Alexandra, who has been leading on all of this, is a PhD economist and an AI leader at Optopol Technology. And she is our community lead for RSA Poland. We have Ollie, sat in the middle here. He's a researcher and designer working at the intersection of digital technology, sustainability policy, and he's currently undertaking a PhD on the design of transformative urban governance systems. Jennifer, at the end here, is a leader, an award-winning journalist, an international speaker and best-selling author, and she currently leads the UK think tank Compassion in Politics. Elżbieta is an entrepreneur and brand strategist with over 25 years of senior roles at global firms and is a passionate advocate of ethical business practices and social impact. So we're going to dive straight into the questions. I don't like to do too much of the talking myself. And Alex, we are going to be starting with you. So popular beliefs suggest that AI will dominate technical tasks, leaving humans to retreat into roles centered purely on soft skills. You recently sat on a panel at the MIT AI Summit in Warsaw. And based on your interactions there, is this idea of soft skills as a safety zone actually holding true in practice?
Very good question, and not an easy one, I have to say. It depends who you're talking to. Actually, soft skills are very important nowadays because of AI expansion. So we are observing definitely transformation within our societies, and that is visible and understood by most people in the world, I would risk saying, this hypothesis. When it comes to skills and job market, we know that the change will come, and it is already coming, and there is a lot of anxiety around it. And we know that the growing population, still growing population of our planet, which is 8.3 billion at the moment, is a big number, and everyone wants to have a job. And within that number, 60% are at the moment, 60% of people of employment age have some jobs, and there are wondering what will happen to those jobs in the nearest future. And that's a valid question. So will we need some extra skills? Should we learn something extra that we haven't learned before? Should we become AI experts to survive in that job market? That's the basic question, which I understand you would like to answer. And the answer is probably you have to be agile. We have to learn and adapt. And that's the skill that we have always had as a species. So that's nothing new, evolutionary skill that we have to adapt. And socially, we have been adapting for centuries now. So I think that soft skills will be augmenting or will be very important to understand AI and to navigate through that transforming society and the landscapes that we are now entering. So soft skills will be important to interpret AI, to also to get to people rather than through algorithmic interactions. We will need to have people who will interact one to one. So definitely they will be important. And if I were anyone, including myself, I would definitely invest in some soft skills, but I wouldn't neglect the fundamental skills, which are technical skills. So both would be important. That's a short answer.
No, that's a great answer. Thank you. Over to you, Jennifer. You've argued that political structures can often strip people of their capacity for empathy. Does AI risk making that worse, nudging us towards more outrage instead of compassion?
Thank you. I'll come to that question in a minute. I would just love to pick up on what my colleague was saying about the challenges around employment, because it's all these challenges are opportunities, and there are moments for a reset on how we look at the world of work. Because since the Industrial Revolution, we've all become units of labor who've abandoned our kinship groups to play our part in an extractive model of capitalism that requires way too much of us and strips us of many of the things that human life should be about. So my hope is that enough of us can really start to lobby for a different approach to work, because at the moment we have those 60% who are in work and often are working ridiculous hours in terrible circumstances, and then we have others who have no work whatsoever. So how about we reimagine how work is divided, how we live as a society, how we structure our week? So I just want to kind of zoom out and say we should be aware of these opportunities, economic models that have been knocking around for a long time. This could be their moment if enough of us put wind under their sails. In terms of your question, I think it's really dangerous. It's not that AI suddenly invents cruelty, it's that all of us as humans are, of course, capable of immense cruelty and also immense compassion and humanity and empathy. And we already have political and media structures that reward anger, fear, tribalism, and hate. So if we simply use AI to amplify that, we are going to be at huge risk to society as a whole and also to our democratic system. So it's really about what system do we want to encourage and amplify, and what AI does, whether it encourages us, whether it enrages us, or whether it allows us to be fully human. And the jury is more than out. It's not looking good at the moment, but there are things we can do, which I know we will come on to later, but I think it's a dangerous moment. One of the things the organisation that I run, Compassion in Politics, has done has been to introduce a new piece of legislation that the Welsh Government has taken up that would criminalise the use of political disinformation by political figures. So I think it's going to be a time to really embed the safeguards that we need to take the values that we as a society want to be founded on and make sure that they are safe and that those values come before the performative impact of new systems.
Thank you very much. And would definitely like to give some time to the solutions as well to all of this. Elżbieta, I'm coming to you next. As AI integrates into every business, how can businesses maintain their strategic agency? Is the British Chamber of Commerce seeing a shift from owning business strategy to simply renting it from tech?
Thank you very much. And also thank you for the earlier comments and answers, because that's very important. I look at the answer from the perspective of entrepreneur who runs companies in the communication and also in sales. But being a member of a board member of British Chamber of Commerce, I also have got the opportunity to look at the corporations. I think that looking from the perspective also from the point of view of marketer and a communicator, I think that every company, every business, if wants to be competitive, needs to look at the side of AI. And it really depends also from the perspective of the owner and owners of the business, how far it should go. It is from one side a chance, from the other side it's also dangerous, because the colleagues already stated on that, and we should look from those perspectives. For me, AI is a chance because it does in our business, in the communication business, where we do corporate PR, we do public affairs, we do a lot of research. It helps to do the research. It helps to strengthen the ability of the teams. But we also have to keep in mind that we are narrowed by the technical algorithm, by the big techs, big American companies. And from my perspective, it's dangerous to rely just on one tool. It's always better to have 2, 3, even more, and check everything that we get out from the AI. And it's extremely important because the mistakes may be very expensive. Also, I think that, when I look at my teams and my organizations, I don't allow to, I don't allow to do anything. I mean, people want to do on their own different things, but this needs to be structured. So a lot of depends on the board and really how the company is managed. So I think that to some point, AI is very helpful. From some point, it may be dangerous. So, and of course, if I talk about British Chamber and other chambers, of course, we try to look in the direction of trainings, proper trainings, but also to look at the possibilities of the technical solutions, not only from America, but Europe. And that's especially we can see it after the Draghi report in the Brussels. Thank you.
Thank you. You raised some really good points there about using a variety and how it's going to be different for every organization. So thank you. Ollie, how does the embedding of a digital life into a physical reality reconfigure our personal agency during periods of rapid systemic change?
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of what's been said already, I think, is relevant to how I sort of see this question of how digital and online life in general structures our agency or reformats our agency. I think something you said in particular, I think really struck a chord, that we have these sort of political structures which reformat our agency and these media structures which echo the same effect. And I kind of want to double click on that, actually, to use a tech term, perhaps an example of how the digital is reformatting my agency, even in a panel talk. I've spent a few years now trying to look at sort of how we exist on the internet and how we show up as people that care about the world and are trying to sort of do something about it in lots of different ways. And lots of small realizations have kind of recently kind of accumulated into this sense that it's a bit doomery, actually, but I think there are lots of really interesting positive alternatives. And I think slowly we're all kind of getting behind them and experiencing a lot of the kind of janky problems of adapting to these alternative systems. But everything from the way that, and I only recently learned this, how Google results appear. There's a bidding war that happens between different people in SEO, in Google Ads, how the news feed is structured, the introduction of the like button, the shape of a social media profile, actually the sort of the layout of an email inbox, all have a really interesting, although quite subtle, sometimes even invisible shaping of our agency. And they all sort of tend us towards this quite atomized understanding of ourselves in interaction with the world. And the political structures echo that. We've been, as you said, sort of severed from these kind of kinship groups and to do sort of wage labor. And I think these two sort of forces, political forces and media forces, accompanied also by kind of consumer forces as well. We've been told, we've all heard of the carbon footprint. Perhaps also many of us know that the carbon footprint as a term was coined by a PR agency working for BP that was looking to shift blame, basically, for the climate crisis away from fossil fuel companies onto individuals. So atomizing agency is kind of a trend that we're sort of fending off from lots of different angles. The shape of our newsfeed, the messaging from our energy providers, And even the nature of democracy is if democracy is the same thing as voting, something I do on my own in a ballot box once every 5 years. What a silly myth. I think one of the challenges now when we have these like massive disruptions, I mean, even in British politics, it's been a really turbulent week, and that doesn't seem to be stopping in any way. Everything feels like this kind of degenerative volatility is just the norm now. And I think so these questions have always been important about what is my agency? How do I interact with systems? Having to fend off this sense that my agency is just me interacting with the world, which in fact it's not, but all these sort of signs trying to shape us in that way. I think it becomes all the more important now that we've got this kind of permanent crisis, polycrisis, meta crisis, happening all the time, that I think we need to have basically conversations like this. What does it actually mean to be agent beyond this very atomized, kind of egoic, quite shrunk, limited understanding of me interacting with change because I posted something on my Instagram, or I sort of went into a box once every 5 years and I put an X next to the name of the person I think is better. Expanding that sense of agency towards a kind of a more ecosystemic thing, and understanding how that means we have to sort of renegotiate our relationship with tech, renegotiate our relationship with the rhetoric of democracy, renegotiate our relationship with work itself. Quite a big set of jobs there, but yeah, no coherent answer other than that these things are shaping us towards the exact opposite direction than the one that we need to, I think, meet the spirit of the day.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that highlighted to me just how many layers there are to this. And I don't think there is a coherent answer to any of the questions that I'm asking today. So not looking for that. Thank you, Ollie. Alex, I'm taking the conversation a slightly different direction now. And in an era of proactive medicine and radical transparency, will people still have the agency to remain unmonitored? Is there a risk that opting out of tracking will eventually be viewed as a social or a legal transgression?
Well, we already talked about crisis. There were words like mega crisis, huge crisis. And, when it comes to medicine, it's a huge market. Let's face it, it's economy. And if you have potential incentives and potential gains, you will do quite a lot to gain as much as you can. So, as a matter of fact, in the last couple of years, big companies have introduced a number of devices, like wearable devices, our watches, Apple Watches, not only Apple, different kind of devices that measure our vital powers and everything that we are and what we are about. And that is a wonderful thing on one hand, because our population, as I already mentioned, is pretty large, and moreover is aging at the moment quite rapidly, especially European population is aging dramatically. Some countries like Italy or Spain, they are already experiencing serious crisis due to demographic crisis. Anyway, so we will need medicine, as we always have. And some of those devices that have been introduced are definitely a good thing for your aging parent, for instance, someone you can't be close to. Perhaps that's not a bad solution. So I wouldn't demonize everything, and I wouldn't call everything a huge crisis. We are definitely going through a phase that we haven't been in that stage of human development ever before. This is something totally new to us. Artificial intelligence is new. All those introduction of devices, economy is new. A lot of things which are going on around us are new. Coming back to your question about medicine, in medicine, there is proactive medicine, there is highly advanced diagnostic medicine. So on one hand, that's a wonderful thing. But I said at the beginning that when there is a demand, there is also greed behind people who would be meeting those demands. So there is a risk that with growing demands on devices, on medical data, the risk will be quite high that at some point the surveillance that you asked about would be problematic, could be problematic. Of course, we are just speculating at the moment because nobody knows what future will bring. We are just, obviously, we read Huxley, we read all well, and we are fed with all that information that mostly paints the future as dystopian rather than utopian. And rightfully so, we should involve critical thinking into analysis of the future. So my answer to that would be that we have to be cautious when it comes to giving our data away for free. Like there are some companies like Amazon, for instance, which is encouraging the employees to actually wear devices, monitoring them all the time. So I think that is quite dangerous if data is in the hands of someone you don't trust. On the other hand, we have to be quite reasonable, and when you need something, you probably should reasonably be using it, but you have to be careful where you are sending your data. And Elżbieta has mentioned already some tools that we have at hand, and those are legal tools mostly. We've got GDPR, we've got HIPAA in the States, which is Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which allows you, to monitor to some extent what is going on with your data. We've got European AI Act, which is also quite powerful. It allows you to opt out from giving access to your data. So there are quite a few things that we can use. The topic is very deep. So the short answer again is we have to be aware that there are some serious dangers, but on the other hand, we should be reasonable. And, we shouldn't be just opting out of everything that we are, unfamiliar with, like devices, because they can save lives. So that's where I'm standing at the moment.
You can.
Sorry.
I will pick up on it.
Okay, I'll ask my question as well. Yeah, I'm really feeling the weight of my Garmin right now. So as often noted, while AI can excel at quantitative reasoning, its social impact can be unpredictable. And in a world of uneven advances, how do we prevent a two-tier society where agency is a luxury available only to those who can afford to bypass that automation?
Thank you. And again, so that it's more of a conversation, I would just like to pick up on something that you said, because I don't think that anyone is arguing in a binary way, we can't have it or everything has to be it. I think we're looking for what role it plays. And I really like the saying about the intellect, in fact, that the intellect is a terrible master, but a wonderful servant. It's great if you use your mind to work out maths problems, how to look at Google Maps, how to write your thesis. But if you want it to answer questions about your heart or your soul or your emotionality, you need to be able to check in with your physical being and your instinct and your gut and all of those things. So I think that the distinction we need to draw is that AI is a fantastic servant to use to do things that further humanity and our lives. And certainly many of the medical interventions that you've alluded to will do that. But we have to have a very strict guardrail in there, because our job as humans is to protect humanity, is to protect the most vulnerable. And at the moment, we have designed machines that can predict human vulnerability before we've learnt how to protect human vulnerability. So I think there's very clearly danger of a two-tier system, systems that are used to weed out claims or provide benefits. And if there's no human being there, then where is the space for empathy? And those who are wealthy will be able to access the human touch, and those who aren't wealthy will have to do with the bargain basement machine solution. So that's one clear way in which it could become two-tier. But the other thing, again, which picks up on what my colleague said here, is just that we need to allow for complexity. Things aren't simple, things aren't binary, things aren't either or. They're all interrelated and they're all complex. And so I think we need to find ways before we go even further down this road. And this really comes to government. We cannot rely on the poachers to set their own terms. That's not for us. We have to set firm regulations based on the harm principle. Are these machines doing harm to us as humans? How are they impacting the most vulnerable in society? Are they adding to human thriving, or are they taking away from it? Are they designed solely around the maximization of profit without looking at the cost of those extractive models? So we really have to adopt at a rapid pace a much more holistic view of how we all work and stop this pretense that we can just produce more and more and work faster and faster and not have to pay the price which the rest of society then bears.
Could I just add something? I totally agree with you. But as you know, there is no black and white, and we definitely, as you said, there is a nuance and complexity. I just wanted to share with you a short personal story when it comes to wearable, for instance, what we could do. We don't need to know. We don't need our watches or phones to ask them how well I slept. What I do personally, I am wearing actually an intelligent watch, but I'm not sending my information to my phone. So I'm not letting my phone to analyze this data. Some of my family members are doing that. Actually, they like to have the data being analyzed. I personally don't. So this is one of the practical things that I can share with you, because I know what happens to that data. That data, as you know, is a new oil. So this data potentially might be sold, and someone is, as Jennifer mentioned, could be profiting from it. So we have to be cautious. But on the other hand, we have to also remember that devices are not evil. They're not doing anything wrong to us. Actually, they are fantastic. I'm working in eye industry on ophthalmology, and I could tell you that things that we are developing are amazing for humans who, we all will have AMD, for instance, which is a macular degeneration of your eye with age. And now what we are doing will help all of us, hopefully, to prevent certain degenerative diseases, for instance, of an eye. So again, as Jennifer said, and it has already been stated here, there is no black and white. There is a lot of nuance, and we should just improve all the time critical thinking in whatever we're doing.
I think that's a really powerful example, and I can't help but bring our mental well-being into this as well. And I think there's a risk there, especially with that sleep example, that we lose trust in our own judgment on our own bodies, which is wild to me. Elżbieta, I'm going to move this into more of the commerce space, with the sort of different risks involved with commerce. Is there a risk that we lose that human touch with commerce as well, and there is human made and human verified becoming like a new premium?
Thank you very much. I just would like to comment on the previous statements. I think that the humans protection is extremely important in all areas. It doesn't matter really where it is. It's just very important. Answering the question, a few months ago, I had been given a speech at Gala of Polish National Sales Awards, and I was talking about the communication machine, potential communication machine to machine, and then machine to the human, and then human to human. Right now we are doing also forum for the leaders in sales and customer experience with regards to AI. And we are involved working on it over the last 2-3 years. And I remember when 2 years ago, everybody was saying that the AI will have potentially extremely important role, and probably the sales jobs, a lot of them will go. And right now, I think that we clearly see that the element of human, the element of communication with people is in many businesses is extremely important. Of course, it does depend on the needs of the customers, because sometimes they want to use the AI assistants in the companies if there is a possibility, but a lot of times I can see that people prefer to use the advisors in person and discuss it with them, the issues that they are interested in. I think it does depend on the customers. I remember at one of our companies, we had a problem once with the internet, and we contacted immediately our provider, and our manager said, okay, I'm trying to solve it, but if you use our AI assistant, it will help you within 5 minutes. And I didn't believe in it, and it worked. During 5 minutes, that problem was solved. But on the other hand, you have people who prefer the contact with people in banking, in investment, in it really depends. But in our environment, in the Society of Polish National Sales Awards, we don't believe that AI will take over 100% of jobs, and I think that's optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ollie, we talk a lot about taking back control online, but what would that actually look like in practice, and where would we even begin?
Yeah, I'm so tempted to sort of derail this and just pick up on so many interesting things that have been said. I did have a question about Palantir as well in the context of this. I wanted to go, but maybe we should save that to the end. Oh, really? Okay, interesting. Maybe we come back to that if we've got time at the end. Taking back control. It's kind of eerie how that rhymes with Brexit somehow, isn't it? It's a blast from the past now. Can you believe it's 10 years? Madness. It's complicated. The idea that we have any in the first place is up for debate. Even if you really zoom out, do we even have free will? That's the whole quote. Maybe we probably won't go there today. But like, in a digital environment that is so tightly designed, I think it's always a kind of creepy reminder that when Facebook first started hiring their UX designers, they hired from the gambling industry, people who designed slot machines, because they were the psychology PhDs who'd best understood that the two-tone difference between this red and that red is going to just train the eye just a few seconds longer, and just like really sucking out attention. Like, to be able to sort of even talk about control and agency in a digital environment that's been designed so granularly like that is perhaps even illusory. But I think there are ways that we can sort of exist in a digital world and an AI world with more agency. I think alternative platforms is a big one. Trying to resist big tech, as futile as it may seem, because we are all somehow complicit in it. You know, the shoes I'm wearing are somehow complicit in big tech. Everything is connected to everything is connected to everything. So I think alternative platforms, and it gets a little bit technical here, but there are sort of alternative infrastructures and protocols on which those platforms can be built. Things like the Fediverse, if anyone's heard of that, platforms like Mastodon, where that are doing sort of the social media thing, but in a radically different way, where you own your own data and you can sort of move it interoperably between platforms. You have a little bit more agency of the shape and the design of the space yourself, and you can start to sort of tweak those things. I think there is also, however, a form of control in actually just not doing those things. And I'm very curious, despite the fact being a very relatively avid, although with a profound sense of moral confusion, avid user of AI, I'm very interested to see the rise of the anti-AI movement and where the dust settles on that. I don't think dust settles anymore at all, is it, in the world? But like, there are lots of little things we can do every day in terms of tech. Choosing which AI models you use, choosing the extent to which you use them and the task you use them for. Putting in barriers to not using them for certain tasks, and whether that's in an organizational way. In my consulting work, I help organizations often sort of say, don't use AI for that, where I'm kind of often brought in on the expectation that we should say, yeah, you can use AI for that. Often they're kind of surprised when I go, don't do that. Claiming back sort of a little bit of agency here and there. But in our really individual lives, I think there's a lot of platforms and tools that are being designed with a kind of an alternative spirit of agency in mind, and I'm happy to talk to anyone afterwards that wants a sort of triaging to some of those, depending on your interest. But there is a proliferation of alternatives like that. The major work is actually going, hang on a second, I'm tied up with digital systems that are shaping my agency in a way I am not comfortable with. Talking about that with yourself, with your friends, and then beginning to look for alternatives. Once you've started looking for alternatives, you'll find loads, and there is other stuff going on. But that first step to disentangling from current digital systems, I think, is the heavy lift, really.
I feel like there may be questions on those different platforms and ways you can go about that. So thank you, Ollie. Alex, if we're moving towards a future where we might be primarily managing digital employees, how can we effectively lead systems that we don't fully understand? What do you see as the likely outcome of this skill delegation over the next 5 years?
Again, I'm happy to answer this question. Can I just, before I do it, could I just shortly comment on what Ollie said? What you mentioned about this untangling from current system of AI platforms and so on. There is something like data sovereignty, and it's being practiced quite widely at the moment. So there are countries which opt out, and we know that also companies want to have the so-called virtual private clouds instead of using clouds which are like available because they're given through the access of superscalers or gatekeepers. So there are certain ways that we can choose now, and companies actually are opting for it to protect your privacy, which is very important nowadays. So I also would like to comment that, you know, we have this tendency as a society to see the black clouds on the horizon more than we see the sun, and we've maybe not to see but to focus on the black clouds. And that's understandable because, again, as Jen said, it's kind of evolutionary. Our brains are wired this way. But on the other hand, I would like all of us to remember that as humanity, we are fantastic species, and we are constructing something totally new, which can be really of huge not only importance, but also benefit to all of us if we are doing it in the right way. You asked me about the leadership and how we are going to navigate, and now I would like to answer that question. The leadership is the problem, and we are observing it right now in the United States and in some countries where democracy has been challenged in many ways. So that's a serious issue. But that's the issue we have always had with ourselves rather than with the machines. So we should focus on ourselves, on soft skills, on understanding who we are, and how can we opt out from building an iron cage that was described by Max Weber. And, you know, because what we are doing at the moment, we are actually constructing something of new nature, powerful, yet, as it has already been mentioned, quite dangerous at the same time. So there is a danger that if AI, as for instance, Geoffrey Hinton and others are claiming, will surpass us in intelligence, we will not be able to understand the collective intelligence of AI. So there is a risk that we are facing, and we should be thinking before constructing any new powerful tools. But on the other hand, Professor Krzysztof Krawec, who is also in this audience, is just about to give a lecture in a couple of days on the topic of beyond LLMs, that artificial intelligence is not only about LLMs, because we tend to imagine that artificial intelligence is all that we see in LLMs. It's far beyond that. So to come back to your question, we might construct something that we imagine is like LLMs, but will be far beyond LLMs and will be communicating in a totally different way than our own, because it will construct its own language and will be able to make decisions behind our backs. So that's possible, but this is very far away from us. So that's like Geoffrey Hinton or other public intellectual like Yuval Noah Harari are claiming that we are approaching super intelligence. I'm in the skeptical group, and I don't believe that we are any close to that. And as I said, I'm interacting with AI systems on a daily basis, and I can appreciate what they can do from our medical perspective for human beings. But when it comes to decision making on a large scale, I think that human supervision will still be necessary and very important, and will be there for a long time.
That reassures me. Jennifer, we are seeing a real push for AI regulation that's focused on safety and risk. And if you were to draft a compassion clause for AI governance, what would you make that look like?
Oh, I love this question. I've given it a little bit of thought, if I can find my thoughts. See, this is the problem with humans. They write notes upside down on bits of paper that they then can't find. I need to be replaced. So, so I guess the questions that I would want to have in the things that I would want to address in any code are, does the system preserve human dignity? Does it protect agency? Can people still make the decisions they want to make and have the information they need to make those decisions and the power to make those decisions? And does it reduce or intensify suffering? We, as an organisation, have been seeking to introduce a measure in the legislative process, which would essentially be an audit of what legislation did before it could be passed. And it would look at what the impact on the most vulnerable in society is. And that if the impact is negative on those groups, then you have to find another way of achieving that objective. So we as a society should not be pushing those who are struggling into further harm. It's sort of like a no harm principle. So I would like to see that. And then I would like to ask the question, does it strengthen or weaken democratic life? And just in terms of, before we even think about what will come in 5 or 10 years' time, things that are already happening. Jess Phillips resigned because Starmer was allegedly too frightened to take on the tech bros to protect children. This is already a good situation when the needs of our children cannot be acted upon because of the consequences, the economic consequences, the punishments that might flow our way. And then I was listening to something on the radio about someone who owned a cafe, and the customers were really angry because prices had risen through no fault of his own because of the war. And he decided to install an automatic ordering system to save his working staff from having to put up with the complaints because it was affecting their mental health. So there we see kind of problems not being solved, but just plastered over. So I don't think we can legislate for all of that, but I do think we really need to protect us as humans. And I think too often with inventions, we've let them run from us and tried to shut the door after the stable horses bolted. I mean, social media is a perfect example of that. We just went, well, that sounds good. And now we can't rein it back in, and same with nuclear weapons. So every time there was one of these huge inventions, could we just try and do it before we give your child a toy to play with, you make sure it's safe. So before we give humanity a new invention, can we just make sure that it's safe?
Thank you. That would be the ideal situation. Elzbieta, I'm coming to you next. And it seems like we're moving away from AI experimentation to AI integration into core business logic. At what point does a business owner lose their agency if an AI system is managing the entire inventory? And how does the British Chamber of Commerce help their members draw that line between augmentation of agency and its abdication to AI agents?
Thank you very much, Lon.
2 questions.
2 questions, yes. But I will try to answer. I will answer the first one, which is about at what point does a business owner lose their agency? And I think what is really important is to remember that AI. We must have the rules of management of AI, which means the really AI governance. And I think that I put a note that a business owner loses agency when they can no longer explain, audit, or override the system managing their operations, which means they lose totally a total control, and it is possible to happen. I think it may also cause what a colleague said earlier about the happening, the anti-AI movements, because it may turn absolutely negative. At the end of the day, everything is the hand of the management, and also of how people are managing their own people and their organizations. And it cannot, AI needs to be controlled. It cannot, just be implemented in the organization without rules. AI does not give a strategy. Strategy is in the hands of the management. And also, I will come back to the chamber in a second, but I would like to give you an example, which I learned about it from my colleague yesterday, and it came a little bit as a shock to me, but I was allowed to use it today. As you know, I run the corporate PR agency, but also we are involved, earlier we were involved in the advertising or classical advertising business, and one of the owners of one of the big advertising agency in Poland organized a meeting with their staff online, the creative teams. Creative teams consist of copywriters, content writers, and also art directors or creative directors. And with great pleasure, the owners informed about the 5 new employees, naming the names as well, and giving the roles like control, data control, control of creative work, control of time, and at the end of that, and finances as well, and budgets. And at the end of the meeting, it was stated that they are the AI assistants. So it was, from my perspective, is unethical. That's why the governance and AI rules are extremely important. And the role of organizations as British Chamber or other business organizations that I'm also involved is extremely important, because these organizations give the best practice, or they start working because we have within our members, we've got companies that can, lawyers or other organizations that can also convey really the message how it should be organized. So it's really a learning process, but I think that at the end of the day, we should ask ourselves a question: if what we do with the AI is ethical. That's extremely important, and it touches, with the issue of, human touch. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm really appreciating these real examples that are coming up. Ollie, the list of things that only humans can do keeps shrinking. So where does that leave us? And is there something at the core of human existence that machines genuinely cannot touch, or is that just a story we're telling ourselves? Big question.
Yeah, it's a big question. I don't know, and I don't think anyone does. There's a trajectory ahead of us in terms of kind of increasing capability that maybe has a ceiling. Maybe the question itself kind of reveals a kind of an arrogance about humans as sort of the locus of intelligence and agency. And I think we've gone through other movements in the past in terms of understanding that, okay, language, that's a really wonderful, unique human thing. Well, actually, it turns out bees kind of do a lot of the things that we thought were unique about human language, and maybe so do mushrooms. Okay, well then we're really good at, we can really sort of like, we can like read and sort of interpret meaning and extrapolate on patterns. Okay, no, LLMs can do that too, and well we can act in the world. Well, agents can do that too. I think we're going to be seeing sort of this every time we set the goalpost. We find ourselves sort of outmaneuvered in some way, and I think that's kind of okay, because I think we were sort of due a bit of a reckoning and sort of decentering our uniqueness in the world. And I think it belies a kind of conceit that really reflects this idea that humans sit atop a pyramid of intelligence and agency and importance, and everything else that's not human And I'm kind of subscriber of the belief that there is nothing outside nature. The technology in our pockets is nature. There is nothing outside. Everything's nature. That nature itself is kind of intelligent, and sort of intelligence emerges from nature in ways that we've not actually yet fully understood. And I find some reassurance in that, because if we are the smartest things in the universe, then yeah, it's not. Sometimes maybe that's a little bit too bleak for some of my colleagues on the panel. And I am generally I'm a cynical optimist. I should clarify with that. I think where though this question, without being able to answer the question where the ceiling is, I think what we can do is to sort of invest in the things that we do feel uniquely able to do, regardless of whether or not we're soon to be proved that actually it turns out that like some new iteration of AI agents or biotech that we've never really even conceived of is due to sort of outperform us in that in some 30-year horizon. Humans are good at lots of things, but I think what I'm interested in investing more in my own work, in my own personal life, are the things that the machines seem to be doing badly at the moment, at least. We're good at embodied stuff, feeling things. We're good at mess and not ordering things, but sort of thriving in mess. We're good at sort of forms of intelligence and knowledge that are really situated and place-based. And we're good at sort of dealing with entanglement. And it seems that machines can't really do those things. They can't really intuit the complex nature of human relationships very well. They can sort of perform a version of that, but when we test that sort of stuff, that's where they seem to fall down at the moment. And I'm really interested in investing in that kind of stuff. I'm doing a PhD. I'm supposed to be sort of learning to be a scientist. It turns out that a lot of the skills I'm working on, actually, I'm kind of being beaten at already in terms of the ability to, digest 500 papers and try and find a compelling through line. I'm worse. There is no competition. But I can sit with that meaning, and I can talk to different people, and I can pick up on things they say, resonate with them emotionally, connect bits of it that are unexpected or abductive or irrational, and feel my way through a conversation and come out enriched regardless. And a machine can't do that. So I think there's aspects of skill in there that I want to not necessarily get better at, but just do more of, really. And I think that's a horizon I feel cautiously optimistic about, despite it being all the sort of likelier that we are outcompeted on every front otherwise.
I personally wouldn't know where to begin answering that, so well done. So looking at the time, I think it's about time to hand over the questions to our audience, both online, on Zoom, but in the room as well. So I'm going to travel around with this microphone, and if anyone has a question bubbling away, there's one already, then I will come to you. Oops, sorry, knock your notes.
So the room is quite small. Need a mic. But I will kick off. Really. I'm sorry. Yeah, and especially for the recording, I suppose. My take on this, and there have been really a lot of interesting ideas, kind of create more questions than answers, which is what happens in great meetings. Maybe I can start with the worst case scenario, and that is a futuristic person just a couple of years ago. He said, the humans as we know them, their world will end either with wars or through the environment being completely depleted, or through AI going wrong. And that's the worst case scenario. Of course, we don't throw the baby with the bathwater. There are promises referred to in these meetings. AI has huge things, like many other things, like many other tools in history of mankind. Nuclear energy was referred to. Could be used for good, could be used for bad. But my interest is since we talked about the agency, we seem to be somehow looking at it from the perspective of individual agency as opposed to focused, converging human agency. And how do we organize ourselves, particularly when we see things going wrong? Perhaps the elephant in the room is, is there any possibilities for activism so that we can prevent the worst case scenario of the future. And we had some good examples. And, I wish that, for example, Oli talked a bit more about Palantir. He promised to talk about Palantir, which really was quite upsetting me about what's happening. This is a system that was used to provide intelligence to military in the Middle East to kill children. And now it's being used to share information about our NHS system. Totally unacceptable. Yet, how much power do we have to prevent these things from happening? And there have been people doing all they can, organized to change things. And it's happening as quickly as possible. And there is also the element of the ethic that I referred to, and the compassion dimension has got the ethical dimension. Maybe one can talk a bit more about what would constitute a guiding ethical framework that we can all work towards in order to influence not only the results of AI, but also the design before even they start being designed, so that that there is more effective ways of addressing this possible future worst case scenario. Thank you.
Who would like to start?
Shall we take a few and then?
Yeah, should we pass the mic around? Oh my goodness, this is great.
That was fantastic talk. Thank you very much, everyone. It's great. Something that came up a lot was the idea of conversations and the requirement for government regulations. Question, what can we do as individuals, and what can we do as the RSA in order to start those conversations happening a lot more energetically? And what should we be pushing government to do? And just with regard to the gentleman's question, so for example, there's the Pro-Human Declaration from the Future of Life Institute, which is sort of precisely that. So, have you signed? Would you sign? Do you think we should all sign? So as individuals, but also at the RSA, because if I may be so bold, I think this is a wonderful event, but striking as an exception to the rule. I'm really astonished how little conversation there is at the RSA about AI and what needs to be done right now in order to get government to put in place the regulations and the rules that, as you say, need to be there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, hi there. It's just a question about national agency in this age, because recently there's an article in FT where they had an ICC member who'd been recently, for unpleasantness reasons, been effectively debanked and removed a lot from the USA technology. And that shows the vulnerability we have to that. For example, one of my old jobs used to be NHS procurement of AI systems. And one of the issues that someone brought up was USA involvement in the data, because the original sin is really the Cloud Act. And that means that we've got a degree of vulnerability to these issues that we never had before. And what would the panel think about what we should do? Be more Eurocentric, just accept it with the USA, China? What should we do for this?
I think we'll take one more, because we probably can only remember 4 at a time, and then we'll pass it back on again.
It kind of, so 2 parts. One, jumping on that is from a just business risk point of view. At the end of the day, OpenAI, Gemini, the 2 big enterprise platforms, I kind of see it as that they're going to get everyone building agents on them and just raise the cost. And that's going to be a big risk to businesses. Same with like cloud, for example. People migrate to cloud. All they have to do is now see you're spending 10p per cloud pool versus 5p. That's going to really disrupt business. Second thing is any talk around agency, I think you have to be like, do you just believe every individual person should have agency? Or do you think agency is only for a select few who can decide how the world goes? And that will really shape how we sort of see AI, because I see the power of it for just learning, for having so an example would be house purchase, working with a solicitor. I can go into AI and say, are they telling me something that's sensible? That's not information I'll have access to. If you think we can empower everyone with that, it can help lots of people. If you think people aren't capable of that, you're going to use AI in very different ways. So yeah.
Thank you. Okay, should we start with the first question? Does anyone feel compelled to answer any of those, actually? Should we start there?
I honestly don't have much to say about Palantir other than sort of, well, that's not true, but I don't know. Yeah, I'd be very interested to hear about that. I was thinking, especially referring to the news of late, that despite sort of a lot of protests to the contrary, that yeah, the sort of the NHS project was given a go ahead, and sort of what that means. And I think your point about Palantir's involvement in war is applies equally to OpenAI and to Anthropic as well. Unfortunately, there's a spirit in sort of some of the questions that I might speak to more generally, in trying to tap into some of the specific pieces around what to do, and I think especially what to do in a sort of like institutional, legal, geopolitical framing. And I think that's quite interesting. We normally say regulation. Problem is, regulators don't understand what this technology is. Often the developers also don't actually understand what the technology is. In many cases, I speak to a lot of AI engineers who sort of you sort of probe some of the sort of like more mythical edges of what AI is, and you get to philosophical questions, and there aren't a lot of answers. In fact, in the early days, sort of the ChatGPT boom, some of those steps that came with what we call transformer architecture were incredibly surprising to the developers themselves. There's a lot of like, you know, we talk about the black box. A lot of people don't understand what we're talking about, least of all, perhaps, the people that actually have power in legislatures around the world. Even when they do, though, and this is another bleak angle, sorry about that, Biden had an executive order to, through the NICE framework, to sort of require AI developers to sort of adhere to safety laws. So rescinded within 2 weeks of Trump's second administration. China has put in legislation. The final sort of chunk of the current bit is supposed to come into force in October, and that is most people around the world are saying it's kind of very easy to sidestep. Basically, you have to watermark any content saying it is AI generated. Of course, you can just remove AI watermarks with AI. You create a 10-foot wall, you just increase the market for 11-foot ladders, as they say. I'm nationally agency. I think the European scale is quite exciting. The EU AI Act has got some teeth, but the power of these transnational corporations that are doing this thing can wriggle around it. For example, the EU AI Act sets some standards around safety, and Meta's AI product, Llama, is an open source one, which is a plus, didn't pass, and so the EU said, well, you can't operate in the EU, and they went, okay, we won't. And of course, anyone that wants to just uses a VPN says, I'm in America and I can use whatever I like. So even when we do these really big, and the EU AI Act, and I have some sort of friends that actually work in some of that machinery of the European Commission, it was a huge lift. And even when that comes into force, these companies can kind of outmaneuver it. So I think it's multiple fronts. Yes, to regulate. Yes, to sort of level up the capacity of regulators to understand what's going on. Yes, to leveling up the social movements to pressure those regulators to take this risk seriously. Yes, to level up our individual capacity to say, regardless of what the regulators do or mostly don't do, I also have agency in this. Yes, to conversations like this where we all go, hang on a second, what if we all created another thing? What if we all created a sort of a push towards changing some sort of policy through the RSA, for example? But yes, I think the general direction of travel that I think excites me, or at least panics me less, is technological sovereignty at the European scale, and regulation with teeth. And I think that will result from increased movements, increased pressure from social movements. And I think, to come back to you, groups like the RSA do have an interesting role to do that. There is RAIN, right, the Responsible AI Network here at the RSA, which I think does some. Well, I mean, yeah. Right. And I think it would be interesting, though, to have a discussion, perhaps even after this, to say, okay, well, in this interim, what kind of agenda might emerge from these kind of more sort of like pro-regulation voices, and what role does RSA have, and to sort of map the terrain there? I think that's interesting, but I'll stop there. Yeah, please.
Maybe from the back with the RSA. Actually, in the RSA, we did quite a lot in the last year. Maybe you haven't been observing everything that we've been doing, but we had Responsible AI Network. And within that community, we have done quite extensive work, and there were quite a few projects as well, and fellows were invited to join in. So responsibility to be responsible for AI is one of the basic things that we should be focusing on at the moment. So anything we are doing, we should take responsibility for it. So that's also answers part of the questions that were asked today. You were asking a question about what was it? I wanted to come back to you about agency. Should individual have an agency? That was your question, right? Yes, indeed, that's a fantastic question, and I think that indeed everyone has the natural right to have an agency. Come on. We are unique human beings, and everyone is an owner of their own life. That's at least my opinion, and I would love everyone else to be of the same opinion. On the other hand, we're discussing democracies. Democracy is a collective responsibility and agency that we have over other groups of people, leadership, and so on. So we also should have this kind of agency over decisions which are being taken collectively, made collectively. So I think both agencies are very important, and they should have place. So on individual level, we should be exercising critical thinking and questioning organizations, sometimes being in opposition to what is going on and being brave enough, and sometimes really getting angry, because we've been brought up to be very kind, especially in Britain. So we are very gentle and kind and polite and everything like that. And sometimes this feature is against us, because people like Donald Trump, like during the conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, he's openly saying that you're not holding cards. I am the one who's holding cards. And what he meant is that Volodymyr Zelensky has no agency, in other words, but he has the agency and he has the power. So here we are. The problem is with leadership, and we have a crisis of leadership, and probably we should start with democracy, and we should start there.
I like that. And I think we also sense this is at a bigger scale, but this is not new. Factories started polluting this to work out what to do about it. When house builders started building across all the beautiful green fields, we had to work out what to do about it. We just have to work faster and to learn from mistakes we made. Having regulatory bodies who didn't understand the regulations they were meant to be opposing, having consequences that are severe enough that they change action, because often when we've regulated, we've done it in a way to appease those who have been upset or wounded by the lack of regulation without actually wanting to take power away. So I think a lot of this is about what is the balance between the organization and the individual, the organization and the government. That example I gave of not being able to take on the tech bros, we have developed a very nice piece of legislation which would declare social media platforms as publishers, and that would be rules that you could do straight away, that we could get rid of. But there was reluctance to take those bold steps because we are scared of what the consequences will be, which comes to your point, because obviously I believe in compassion, but compassion requires strength, it requires courage, it requires saying no, it requires saying it as it is, and it requires standing up to bullies and saying, I'm not going to pretend something's okay when it isn't. So you ask what we need as individuals, it's the same as what we governments want courage to raise those difficult questions. And I love the RSA develop its own position, and hard because often when we want governments to change, we have to make it easy for them to change. And one of the ways that we make it easy for them to change is to show that there are votes in creating change. So we can be part of that tilling the field of change, if you like, amplifying and raising the issues and providing solutions. It's easy to say there's a problem. It's much better to say, listen, here's an easy fix or a complicated fix that will actually shift things.
And Cloud Act, maybe Elizabeth,
Yeah.
would you like to answer the question about Cloud Act?
Yes, I think that, with regards to the big techs of the Americans, we all right now live with them and haven't got that much choice. However, when we discuss it in Poland, I think that, we found out that there are some French cloud solutions. But they are on, operating in a niche market. However, I know that we've got some operations with this cloud and it's working. So our IT is quite happy with that, and I think it's OVD or OVH, the name, yeah, I think that they are quite competitive. Also, I think in Poland we have some tools that had been developed that click meeting instead of using Teams and so on. But we have to keep in mind that it is extremely expensive to develop this kind of tools, and it should be operated on the either EU scale, and there are some acts of the EU that the EU challenges the development after the Draghi report to develop in Europe own technical tools instead of the big tech. But also, when we work with the Polish government, the Ministry of Cybersecurity or Cyber Solutions, we can also see that it's a huge responsibility on the side of government in terms of AI and also tools, and it comes up really to the budget. And I always say that it's nice to talk, but sometimes talking is not enough. You just need to have a procedure how to change the situation. You need budget, you need structure, you need to have an idea. Without this, you can talk until next election. And that's, unfortunately, we have to keep in mind that this kind of things, it goes, around circles. And, in the British, I'm also involved in the one of the biggest Polish think tank, political think tank. And there are people from American big techs involved there, Dell and Google and so on. So I can see really how influential they are, the kind of lobbying stands behind it. And I am a strong believer that, Europe should, really put a straight policy on how to develop their own tools to really become more competitive in this field. There's no really explanation why not. I believe in Poland we may start building up, but we'll see. So, thank you.
Thank you. It might take us a few minutes over time, but got time. A couple of succinct questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Great panel session so far. Thank you so much. Just about 10 days ago, Yuanxing Huang of NVIDIA was speaking at the Milken Institute, and he made a statement that I'll be very keen to hear your point of view. He said that there's been a lot of noise about AI and the danger of it. And sometimes as human beings, we forget that just as many intelligent people are working on AI, there are also intelligent people working on making sure AI doesn't sort of become a danger to the society. And he gave an example of the radiology department and how before it became proliferated and widely accepted, people were concerned that radiologists were just going to be wiped out as a career. But they found that actually it's given back more time to the radiologist, and big hospitals are finding that that's a cost center that's improved, and they've been able to sort of generate more funds and be able to do a lot more as a hospital, because now the radiologists are positioned as partners with the doctors to actually work for the patient, as opposed to just sitting down behind a computer analyzing. So I would just be keen to sort of hear your point of view on that. Is he a bit too sort of, is he trying to save the day, knowing fully well, obviously, he has a business to run?
Thank you. I'd like to take it away from that a little bit if I can. We've been talking an awful lot about AI, which actually isn't something in the title of the talk whatsoever, which is about agency in the age of rapid transformation. And, you know, there's a lot of, AI is a bit of the transformation, but it's only a tool. The bigger parts of the transformation, all around, in my view, around globalization, around very big businesses which are bigger than the countries concerned, around life just becoming more complex, about money being concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, and about people losing agency through these reasons. I'm less concerned about the AI aspect of it, actually, but all the other bits which are causing us to, within this huge transformation that's appearing in society at present, which is causing each of us individually to lose agency, just to a very few big operatives, be they countries, be they individuals, or be they businesses. So I'd sort of like a more general, perhaps, discussion towards the end on that, because actually I'm coming from another point of view, which is, and I will admit this, I'm working on a project at present with others called the National Strategy Project. And we're working with Stanford University on actually trying to use technical tools and AI to give people back agency. So I'm actually quite happy with AI, providing we use it properly, because I think it can be a tool to solve the problem. But I think the problem arises from all those other areas, not from AI. So I'd be very grateful for your views on that.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that they're both essentially the same question. It's what's the purpose of the system? If the purpose of the system is to improve health, you may get the same outcome as if the purpose of the system is to maximize the profits for the private shareholders who run the health provider. So it's what is the goal? What is the aim? And I know Catherine, and I'm also affiliated with Stanford, and Ollie mentioned emotions, and I wanted to talk about the value of connection, because that is the greatest evil. It's how those systems that you're talking about have atomized us and separated us and caused huge health crises and social crises. But I want to come to one other system which I think underlines everything that we've said, which is that there are essentially two systems in conflict at the moment. There's a wonderful story that many of you have heard from the first academic who invented happiness economics, and he talks about which wolf are you feeding, that inside each of us we have two wolves fighting with each other, and one is the wolf of greed and status and longing and envy and power. And the other wolf is a gentler wolf. It's the wolf of kindness. It's the wolf of love. It's the wolf of generosity, of beauty, of truth, of expansion. And you know, which wolf wins depends on which system we feed. And those two wolves map onto our evolutionary system as well. You know, are we triggered and in fight and flight? And those systems that you talk about keep us constantly in a state of fight or flight, which means we can't access the part of our brain that is able to think clearly and is able to, you know, perform the tasks that we need to perform, because those only happen when we're in rest and digest. So we have shifted ourselves out of a system which is based on common care and kindness and connection and the values that have no numeric worth, into a system where everything has a price tag, and we've all collectively been sold a lie, which is the more we have, the better we'll feel. And that's simply not the case. So it's what is our goal and which wolf are we feeding, I would say, are the answers to both your questions.
I think I understood those questions a little bit differently. I know that we are running out of time. I think that the gentleman was asking why we were talking about AI when we were supposed to talk about agency in the age of transformation. And if I understand you well, you were trying to say that AI is not everything that is under this banner of transformation. Is that what you wanted to say? Okay, so I think that those two subjects are somehow interconnected, because you also mentioned that we are in the era of globalization, but on the other hand, we know that the globalization is now shrinking, that we are actually retreating from that trend. However, mentioning AI in all those aspects of today's discussion, I think is not without, is substantiated for, because when we come to economy, the market economy of AI at the moment is so huge, and we know that the predictions for 2030 are in trillions of dollars. Like some of the predictions are saying that we will spend about $2 trillion US dollars for AI only. So I think that there is a huge connection between transformation and AI, and talking about transformation without AI at the moment would be almost impossible, because AI seems to be like permeating every facet of our life. So
with due respect, that wasn't quite the point.
Okay.
The point was that AI can help agency.
Mm-hmm.
But the problems with agency are much wider than AI.
Absolutely. Yes, I understand that point, and I totally with you on that. So they are much deeper than just AI, and AI is just part of this problem. So totally, I totally agree. And to the other question about medical AI and radiologist, I think that you were trying to say, if I understand you well, that we were supposed to have AI agents rather than radiologists, and now we still have radiologists. So that was the point. And that was also my point, that we were promised that we will have, self-driving cars a long time ago. We were supposed to go to the Mars, right? And we're not there yet. So again, what gentleman was saying, AI is just part of this journey that we are taking part in, and we are all participating. So what you were saying about agency today, we all have this agency, and we should be taking part in the public discussion, like about compassion. We should be understanding, and that's exactly what Jen is doing. And the book she has written about compassion, we are forgetting about those soft skills that we also addressed today. And also we addressed law, and you were asking about US Cloud Act, actually, if I understand you well, which is in contrast with GDPR and the EU AI Act, because there are some contradictions. So all of that together, if I can sum up, I see like there is an intersection of all of that subjects, and I think that what we can do to build our agency, we should be compassionate to one another, to understand one another, to understand each other's needs beyond AI and with AI. So we should use AI, as it was said, to help ourselves rather than to ambush ourselves, and to try to use AI as Palantir is doing and some other evil companies. Let's put it that way. So with that being said, I think that summarizes it and sums it up. Anyone else wants to add anything?
I think that was a lovely summary, and thank you for all of the thoughtful questions. I want to say thank you to everyone who's joined online as well. Yeah, it's really lovely to see that it's a strong audience on a Friday evening. So thank you for giving your time when you could be anywhere else to listen to our fantastic panelists. Panelists have been really, really thoughtful, and they're big, tricky questions in my view. So yeah, thank you so much.